problem I find, living a life that I can't leave behind. There's no sense in telling me the wisdom of a fool won't set you free. That's the way that it goes, it's what nobody knows, while every day my confusion grows. I don't think you're what you seem. I admit to myself, if I hurt someone else, I'll never see just what we're meant to be. Every time I see you falling, get down on my knees and pray. I'm waiting for that final moment. You say the words that I can't say. Every time I see
Hello, family. It's been a nice couple days away from stressing myself out with making content. Made the one for TikTok with the Walter Cronkite. Hopefully you got to see that. felt good to actually get back in there. You know, you can get oversaturated, right? That's a thing that happens. But I love what I'm doing, and tonight's show is really important to me as far as the subject matter. I could do a series. I could do 6, 8, 10 shows probably on this. So what I'm going to do is try to wrap it up into one show. We're going to go with the 50,000 foot view, and then potentially dive deeper into it, next week. But this is actually the topic that got me into content. Before I came across the simulation hypothesis, I was just kind of a conspiracy theorist apologist. And those of you guys that know my story know that I was really mad at God. I was raised by a really fervent, almost fanatical Christian mother. And then when she died, my dad died, all these things happened. I walked away from God, and then science brought me back. And what I mean by that is I was like, yeah, there's no God. And then I started thinking about, well, how did we get here, right? Big Bang, Darwin, all this stuff. And what happened, really what brought me back, I was like, I don't think I ever believed in evolution. I don't think I ever bought that story at all. But what happened is I was eating a banana, and it occurred to me that the banana was individually packaged, like in a like a Twinkie, like in a, how that's in like an oxygen proof cellophane wrap or whatever. I'm like, wow, you unwrap the banana and like an hour later it's totally brown. It's like, how did that happen evolutionarily? How in the world is a banana going to evolve packaging so it would be easier to eat? Like, that's ridiculous. And at the same time, I was looking at the moon, and I don't think I was eating a banana looking at the moon. Standard story. Guy just sitting back, munching a banana, looking at the moon, right? Story as old as time. But in that same time frame, I was looking at the moon, and I realized that it's made of reflective dust. And if it wasn't made of reflective dust, if it was made of dirt, it wouldn't shine light, and it wouldn't give us moonlight. And it goes through this 30-day procession, and the sun and the moon are the same size in the sky. God set a light by day, a light by night. I'm like, we're in a designed order. So what does this mean? So I started looking into it. And from that point, this was about 2002, I've known that we're in a designed order. But what does that mean, right? What does that mean, being in a designed order? Well, I was studying the Bible code and the simulation hypothesis, the idea we're in a video game like The Matrix. And I'm going to show you some clips from that documentary tonight. And it all fit together in my brain. This idea that we are in God's simulation, right? The God of the Bible potentially chose something like a simulation for the construct of this reality. And it answers so many questions. It answers how our consciousness interacts with this reality, quantum physics, where this universe came from, the idea that it came from wherever God is, the kingdom of God, the idea that the kingdom of God would be around us. It answers so many questions. So to this day, I'm the only person I know that's a Christian apologist simulation hypothesis guy. And my first piece of content I made, the operating system, deals with it. And the idea that all computer programming operates off of programming. And the Bible code would lend to me to the idea that the Torah is the source code. So if you haven't seen my movie, The Operating System, that's what it's about. It's the first piece of content I made. And I'm super passionate about this. It's interesting, though, because when I talk about it, I get a lot of my Christian contingency. They get cold feet about it, which I get because it seems kind of woo-woo-y. But the thing is, this is like borderline hard science. And we're basically to the point that everybody is understanding it. And the metaverse, which is what we're going to talk about, how God's matrix or the simulation ends up in the metaverse, just further confirms this idea of this battle between God and the devil and what brings the end times. So yeah, it's your standard talk, guy munching a banana, looking at the moon, talking about how we're in a video game, which is the fulfillment of the prophecy of the Bible, right? Standard stuff. If somehow I haven't lost you, I'm your guy. If that's your niche, if that's your thing, there you go. So that's what we're going to cover. It's going to be, the goal is 25-ish minutes, kind of going over the science of the simulation and the idea of us being in a video game. I could do a series of shows just on the technology and the science behind that. But then we're going to go into science says we're in a simulation. What does that mean? What is the philosophy? That's actually why I say with Voice of Reason's philosophy, theology, conspiracy. It's from the simulation hypothesis. There's no bigger people think flat Earth is a conspiracy, and it's a big one. No, us being in a video game is much bigger, because the flat Earth or globe Earth would be inside of this video game. This is bigger than the flat Earth. This is the biggest conspiracy there is. And then there's the theology, like, who's the programmer? I actually tried to copyright who is the programmer and where's the computer, and I was going to make shirts with it and stuff, and I didn't do it. Oh, by the way, The Matrix was a documentary. Just saying. Face mic. Okay. And then the philosophy. This really does deal with philosophy. Philosophy is kind of trying to reconcile your reality, right? And your life experience and science, and putting this all together. So I think you have to have all of them. So this is what Voice of Reasons is about, this subject. And I love it. Okay. Just a quick poll. We've got, quite a few people in here. Thank you guys for being here. Can I just, as I go to the next thing here, who thinks we're in a simulation? Who doesn't? Thumbs up, thumbs down. And I'll pull up the first video. So the point of these videos, I'm going to glean off of some of my favorite simulation videos. And we're going to look at the science of a crash course in why we could potentially be in a simulation. And then again, we're going to look at what I think the fatal flaw is that science does with this. They can't reconcile it because they don't believe in God, and they don't ever get the right answer because of it. And then we're going to look at how I believe with all of, I don't say with all of my heart, that's a stretch, but I believe very firmly that the metaverse is straight designed from Satan, like 100% a Luciferian construct. And it could potentially be why we are judged and why the end is coming. The metaverse could potentially bring God's judgment, which is what happened with Atlantis. Okay, so 20-ish minutes on each of these sections, and we'll see if I'm able to stick to that. Again, this could be multiple parts. The very first thing I want to show you, and this is near and dear to my heart, because I've studied this man. His name is Philip K. Dick, and he is one of the most profound thinkers and writers of our time. Absolute prophet. Unbelievable the information he was getting. He actually struggled with with the nature of reality and his life and his consciousness unto his death. He was a super genius, and he was connected to other somehow. I don't know if he was getting his information from God or demons or angels or whatever, but he was getting this information, including this video that I'm going to show you. He is going to make a claim here in September of 1977. Okay, I was born then. That's a long time ago. And I remember video games. I remember Pong and what the video games were like in, I think probably I was sentient, about 1981. They were crap. Pong was 2 lines and they would say a ball, but it was a square. It was like a 1x1 pixel, and it would bounce between the lines. Beep, boop, beep, boop, beep, boop. That was the video game. And at this time, this man who was a visionary, who predicted the Minority Report, Blade Runner, what is it? Something, my tears, something about my tears, Electric Sheep, just all this like tyrannical dystopian things that are seeming to come true. He has this vision, right? This, by
In
the way,
September of 1977,
is a movie called A Glitch in the Matrix, which came out after my movie, The Operating System. And the guy, if you ever want to have fun, rent this video and watch my movie, The Operating System, and try and tell me which one came out first, because somebody gleaned somebody, and it wasn't me gleaning him. So somehow he watched my documentary because he picked like all my B-roll and the exact like chronology, or he just we're in the Matrix and we both got the same information at the same time, which is entirely possible. Okay, check this out.
the writer Philip K. Dick, creator of Minority Report, Blade Runner, and Total Recall, addressed an audience of fans in Metz, France. They expected a talk about science fiction, but his lecture explored religion and philosophy as well. To him, all three subjects were deeply interconnected.
I got to stop there. I literally was voice of reason's philosophy, theology, conspiracy before this documentary came out. He's like, oh, all three things are intrinsically connected. And I had like said that a bunch of times, whatever. Cry me a river.
The title of my address is, If You Find This World Bad, You Should See Some of the Others.
Le titre de mon discours sera
The subject of this speech is a topic which has been discovered recently and which may not exist at all. I may be talking about something that does not exist. Therefore, I'm free to say everything or nothing.
le sujet de ce discours est sur quelque chose qui a été découvert il y a très peu de temps.
We are living in a computer-programmed reality.
Well, they cut that off even. That was non-eventful. I should have done the one from my movie. Maybe I'll do that. I'm going to shift really quick. I'm going to call an audible here. And I'm going to show mine because that wasn't very good. Guys that ripped off my movie. It's my first one. Ooh, further back than that. Here's all my movies. Here it is. Oh, it's not going to play on that page. Let me find the right page. Sorry, guys. I'm doing a little audible here. Partly because I want to show you that I made the movie first, and partly because he didn't do it the right way. Okay.
Code is. It is a glance into the potential outcomes that are encoded into the source code.
There's the punchline of my documentary.
The subject of this speech is a topic which has been discovered recently and which may not exist at all. I may be talking about something that does not exist. Therefore, I'm free to say everything or nothing. I know of no one who has ever made this claim before. We are living in a computer-programmed reality.
Well, maybe we're in a simulation right now.
Yeah.
Okay. So, no one had ever made this claim in the history of the world, and he didn't have access to technology that would have ever, given him the justification to make that claim. The guy was some sort of prophet, whatever. He goes, yeah, we're living in a video game. Yeah, I see Pong, you see Pong, and we live in a video game, whatever. And so it starts to snowball around the time the Wachowskis make the movie The Matrix. That actually inspired the movie The Matrix. And around that time, computer science technology was increasing fast enough that people like Elon Musk started saying, yeah, we're probably in something like the Matrix, something close to that. I'll show you this, and then I'll show you a couple more articles. This guy asked the question.
Sort of a philosophic concept that a sufficiently advanced civilization would be able to create a simulation. Yeah, maybe you've answered this before? A simulation.
I've had so many simulation discussions, it's crazy.
Okay. So, because
in fact, it got to the point where basically every conversation was the AI/simulation conversation. And my brother and I finally agreed that we would ban such conversations if we were ever in a hot tub. That was like...
I'm glad he said that. Every one of his conversations boils down into basically the nature of reality. What are we doing here? Are we in a simulation? and AI. Why are we making AI? Okay, well, spoiler on this whole video. The devil's making the artificial simulation that we're all going to go into with the metaverse. And the devil's also pushing these guys to make AI. Why are they so hell-bent literally on making AI, artificial intelligence? Why would they be so interested? I mean, from Mary Shelley and Frankenstein, like making life, making consciousness is a bad thing. It just, we don't have the authority. We don't have it's a copy of a copy. We don't have the resources to even understand what this could possibly be. Why are we so hell-bent on making a simulation that we all go into? And why are we so hell-bent on creating life? Because the devil runs the world system, right? It's like really easy. I don't want to make life. Everybody knows AI is going to wipe us out. No, we got to make AI, whatever. Hey, Elon, you build rockets and you made PayPal and you got all the money in the world. What do you want to talk about? Oh, AI in the Matrix, because that's everything. That's everything.
Because that really kills the magic.
So the idea is, right, any sufficiently advanced civilization could create a simulation that's like our existence. And so the theory follows that maybe we're in the simulation. Have you thought about this? And
a lot.
Are we
even in hot tubs? So much so it had to be banned from a hot tub.
People are so destroyed by this information.
Are we in?
I mean, I think here's, in my mind, like the strongest argument for us being in a simulation, probably being in a simulation, I think is the following.
Probably.
That 40 years ago, we had Pong, like two rectangles and a dot. That was what games were.
Pong.
Now, 40 years later, we have photorealistic 3D simulations with millions of people playing simultaneously, and it's getting better every year. And soon we'll have virtual reality, we'll have augmented reality. If you assume any rate of improvement at all, then the games will become indistinguishable from reality.
Okay, so he said this 4 years ago. When did Ready Player One come out? Around the same time. These guys are always 3, 5, 10 years ahead, whatever. Pretty soon we'll have VR. Then we're gonna have augmented reality. And then, like, this is what's going to happen. Like, this is happening. You can't stop it. So he's justifying, this is philosophically why we'd be in a simulation. This doesn't have to do with the science.
Just indistinguishable. Even if that rate of advancement drops by 1,000 from what it is right now, then you just say, okay, well, let's imagine it's 10,000 years in the future, which is nothing in the evolutionary scale. So given that we're clearly on a trajectory to have games that are indistinguishable from reality, and those games could be played on any set-top box or on a PC or whatever, and there would probably be, billions of such, computers or set-top boxes, it would seem to follow that the odds that we're in base reality is 1 in billions.
So
tell me what's wrong with that argument.
Is the answer yes?
The argument is probably. I mean, but I just like, is there a flaw in that argument?
I mean, someone.
I'm not sure what the error.
No. The argument makes sense. So the assumption then is that somebody beat us to it, and this is a game.
No. There's a 1 in billions chance that this is base reality.
Oh, okay. What do you think?
Well, I think it's 1 in billions.
Okay.
Okay. So this is Elon Musk saying that there's a 1 in. First off, he basically concedes that we are in the Matrix. We are in a simulation. That's basically what he says here. And he says that there's 1 in billions a chance that we're in base reality. But we're going to talk about that a little bit later. That's not actual science. Okay, so this isn't some taboo thing. Okay, this is legitimate. People are really thinking this now. And what's surprising, you heard the guys like laugh on there. It's like, oh, you can't believe this, can you? There's no way you would actually believe this. Bank of America thinks there's a 50% chance we live in the Matrix. This is a Business Insider. Like, people that know that this is a reality. They know it. And the only reason why this is so hard for us to even wrap our mind around is because of Einstein and Darwin and Lyell and Dawkins and all these yahoos teaching you this other version of reality. You're taught philosophic materialism. This is why it's hard. People are like, there's no way we live in a video game. I know this thing's real. It's not real. It's not fixed. It's molecules. Everything that we think we know is wrong, and they just told us a version so we would comply, basically, right? We would believe them. It was believable, whatever. But the actual science is like 100%, not even 100%. It's most easily explained in the idea of an information-based reality designed by some sort of super intellect built around the consciousness of man. That's like, I'm an Occam's razor guy. That's the most plausible explanation for reality. This whole multiverse, abiogenesis, anthropic principle thing is nonsense. And I'm going to make a shirt that says like atheists, I admire their faith, because it's ridiculous how much faith they have to believe their thing. Okay, so this is the documentary that seriously formed, it galvanized my, it satiated my science mind and really concreted this idea. It's actually a movie called The Simulation Hypothesis. I suggest you guys watch it if you would like. A lot of the stuff I teach on is compatible with or influenced by this. So we're going to cover a couple things on here. Joe Biden. We're going to cover philosophy or philosophic materialism versus idealism. We're going to cover the double slit experiment and quantum entanglement. It should take us about 15 minutes, and then we're going to move on. So just need to make the point of this. If you know the simulation information, come back in 15 minutes or fast forward past this part. If you don't know about this, you need to. If you're someone who's pushing back on this idea because you don't think it fits your narrative, either you're an atheist or you're a Christian or whatever, and you just don't think this thing is valid, look into it. It's very most likely what's going on. So here we go. First part is idealism versus materialism. You need to understand the philosophy behind this.
Democritus? What do these guys have to do with anything? I thought we were talking about science, not philosophy. Well, all scientific inquiries are based on one or more philosophical positions. So let's quickly go over some of the philosophical arguments that different scientific approaches are built upon. Ancient Greek philosophers already had the basic idea of the atom, and they used this idea to help them explain how reality worked. Out of all their various conversations, several very different views emerged. These views are best expressed in the works of Plato and Democritus. Democritus built his philosophy of materialism on the assumption that atoms are eternal, indestructible, and are the only things that really exist. All other things exist, said Democritus, only because they are composed of atoms. Following this logic leads you to believe that consciousness is a product of physical processes in the brain. This is the philosophical assumption that Isaac Newton, Charles Darwin, and most Western scientists until very recently built their work on. Plato built his philosophy of idealism on the assumption that the basic underlying structure of everything isn't the atom, but abstract mental forms that determine an object's properties. Plato believed that ideas are more fundamental than objects. For instance, a perfect or ideal sphere exists only as an abstract mental form or idea. Any sphere that we see in the world, like a basketball, is simply an approximation of the ideal sphere. By following this logic, you come to believe that consciousness is primary and gives rise to all physical matter and process. In other words, everything begins with consciousness, and there is a mind behind what we experience as physical matter. In much the same way that when you dream, your mind is creating a physical experience for you while you sleep. As you can see, these philosophies are mutually exclusive and are in fact opposites. Both cannot be true. Either mind gives rise to matter, or matter gives rise to mind. It's a very, very old debate, but science has finally harnessed enough power to settle it once and for all.
Okay, I should probably just trust that you gleaned enough off of that, but let me just really encourage you to think about that. Okay. Either this reality went through some sort of evolutionary process, the Big Bang and matter sticking to matter and then planets forming and then DNA. Nobody will ever be able to explain where DNA came from. No one will ever be able to explain what consciousness is. But somehow inanimate material created consciousness and created information. I mean, seriously, think about a rock ever in a million billion years. I don't care how much lightning hits it, shooting out information, writing you a letter. It's not going to happen. Okay. So either matter created consciousness or a consciousness created this material, this world. That's it. That's it. It's one of those two realities as best as we can reconcile. And we were taught a lie. We were taught that matter created consciousness. That's what the Big Bang teaches. That's what Lyell and Dawkins and that's what they all teach. Okay. What I love, he just said, we finally now have the science to challenge this. And the science is showing that that is a lie. And the most realistic scenario is the simulation. Here we go.
The scientific hypothesis that our world is virtual or dreamlike has been explored in depth by many scientists, including Dr. Brian Whitworth. He took the two opposing views, one being materialism, that our universe is entirely physical, exists in and of itself, and needs nothing outside of it to explain it, and the other being the simulation hypothesis, that our universe exists as a virtual construct and depends on information processing happening outside of space-time. Dr. Whitworth looked at all the facts that have been gathered from experimental results and asked which view better fits these facts. After a thorough analysis, his conclusion was that the data much better fits the simulation hypothesis.
Right now, we're inside a computer program?
Scientifically, our universe simply makes more sense when viewed as a virtual construct emerging from consciousness, rather than simply matter existing independently of the mind.
This isn't real.
What is real? How do you define real?
The analysis starts at the beginning, with the Big Bang. This well-established cosmological model demonstrates that space-time was created by a single event billions of years ago and expanded into what we see around us today. Nearly all scientists agree that our universe began to exist at one point in the distant past. From the materialist view that our universe is all there is, as an objective, independent reality, the fact that the Big Bang came from nothing is very hard to explain. How could everything come from nothing? But if you look at the universe as a virtual construct, the Big Bang model works perfectly. Virtual worlds always begin with an information influx from a zero state, since they need to initially boot up. Every time a computer game starts up, a Big Bang occurs from the perspective of the game. From inside the virtual world itself, the creation always comes from nothing, because before it boots up, there is no space or time as defined by the rules of that virtual world.
Right. How much clearer is that? I put that in my documentary. To me, that's just the answer. Nobody can figure out where space-time came from, where the matrix or where the universe came from. It came from it came from some other place, right? If Mario tried to reconcile where his video game world came from, he'd be like, I don't know. I was just here. And we'd look at him like, I don't know. Well, try to explain to Mario that he's sitting on the floor of my front room in a box that's connected to the power grid. I'm flesh and blood. I breathe oxygen. And, whatever, we created him. I didn't. Obviously, the amazing Japanese computer engineers and scientists that created Mario did, but it was an intelligent mind. This is how it works. This is what we should be taught. And we can't be taught this because religion has really sullied the waters, right? And I get like who then, if we're in a simulation, whatever. But we're going to get into that here in a second. I wanted to do the delayed double slit experiment because I think this is important to kind of further solidify this idea. So let me show you this really quick, and then we'll move on to the more conspiracy side of it. It's just important, like, if we're just talking about the Matrix is just an idea, we're in a Matrix, I don't think it has as much effect. If we can really look at this from a scenario where science is actually pushing this idea, I think it carries more validity.
Then, in 1964, the Irish physicist John Bell proposed his famous theorem. It's a very clever mathematically based way of experimentally testing and proving one way or the other who was right. Doing the experiment would require some very special hardware. It took 18 years for this technology to become available, and in 1982 the physicist Alan Aspect put it all together and ran the experiment. The results confirmed that non-locality was actually real. What Schrödinger had called entanglement, and was defended by Bohr but ridiculed by Einstein, was a fundamental property of nature. Instant correspondence can be seen between two particles that are separated by unlimited distance in space, and this only makes sense if the world is a virtual construct. In a virtual world, distance doesn't limit correspondence, since all points in a simulation are equidistant with respect to the source of the simulation. For example, in a computer game, all points on the screen are at equal distance with respect to the processor, and the same effect can be seen in our world. If our universe is a simulation projected onto a three-dimensional screen, then its processor would be equidistant to all points in the universe. Non-locality, one of the biggest problems in physics, is easily solved by the simulation hypothesis. Space seems to be an illusion created by the virtual construct. But even stranger than space being an illusion is what quantum physics tells us about matter itself.
If I were a character in a computer game that were so advanced that I were actually conscious and I started exploring my video game world, it would actually feel to me like it was made of real solid objects, made of physical stuff. Yet if I started studying, as the curious physicist that I am, the properties of this stuff, the equations by which things move and the equations that give the stuff its properties, I would discover eventually that all these properties were mathematical. The mathematical properties that the programmer had actually put into the software that describes everything.
The server that's creating you is not in your reality frame. It's outside. If you're Sims, that computer is non-physical to you. What's physical to you is your Sims world.
All right, I'm excited about this next part. So we do more viewer feedback back on TikTok when we do the live show. But I see Reeves that you're talking about that you are a Christian and you hesitate on the simulation, and that's totally fine. I actually don't know if it's a simulation. I think it makes sense that this would be the technology that the creator used. But when we go to TikTok, you can definitely ask me some questions about it. I want to be really clear, though. I'm not being heebie-jeebie or woo-woo-wee or new agey with this. I'm really what I'm doing is looking at the potential technology that God would have used. It doesn't change, it would be the God of the Bible is the creator. And I actually do a teaching on the idea that Jesus was teaching us about quantum physics and this idea that your faith has made you whole and you can walk on water because it's really what you believe, and matter takes that form, and bringing people from the dead and like just breaking all of the rules. That when he said take a mountain off of its foundation, throw it in the sea, was he speaking metaphorically, or was he saying that that this reality is built around the consciousness of man? And that's what I would say that he was doing. So I think that it's entirely possible, and it's a tough trail to try to blaze to try to get Christians to see that this is a potentiality. But yeah, definitely pray about it. But I don't think that it's in any kind of violation of what Scripture says. I think it's just really kind of looking at it from a different perspective. And an example would be like young Earth creationists struggle with the idea of starlight. How can we see stars that are 13 billion light years away? Well, I've got an answer for you. If we're in a simulation, they're not 13 billion light years away. We're taught that light travels at a speed, and the universe was built X amount of million years ago. Well, if we are in a simulation, all those kind of rules are out the window, and it's just God's created reality. So I'm going to show you the double slit experiment. Again, Reeves, if you want to talk about it when we go to TikTok, I'd love to cover it. But this is really important, and then we're going to be done with the science of this. So I'll give you about another 3 minutes.
Prior to observation, matter does not seem to exist. Matter seems to be the result of an interaction between consciousness and waves of potential. This has been demonstrated repeatedly in ever more precise versions of the double slit experiment, from the 1920s right up through the present. To understand the double slit experiment, we first need to know how particles behave. If we shoot small objects at a detector, we will see a clump pattern form where they went through the slit and impacted. If we add a second slit, we would expect to see a second clumping duplicated to the right. Now let's look at waves. The waves go through the slit and radiate out, striking the back wall with the most intensity directly in line with the slit. The line of brightness on the back screen shows that intensity. This is similar to the clump pattern. But when we add the second slit, something different happens. When the top of one wave meets the bottom of another, they interfere and cancel each other out. This results in an interference pattern on the back wall. Where the waves reinforce each other, they are at the highest intensity, the bright lines. And where they cancel each other out, there is nothing. So, when we fire objects through two slits, we get two clump patterns, but with waves, we get an interference pattern. An electron can be seen as a very small bit of matter. And when a stream of electrons is fired through one slit, they behave like small objects, forming a single clump pattern. So if we fire these bits of matter through two slits, we should get two clump patterns. But we don't. We get an interference pattern. We fired particles through, but we get a pattern like they're waves, not like little objects. How can pieces of matter create an interference pattern like waves? It doesn't make sense. At first, physicists thought that the electrons were bouncing off each other to create this interference pattern. So, in 1961, Klaus Johnson at the University of Tübingen in Germany modified the experiment to fire the electrons through one at a time. This way, there is no possibility of them bumping into and interfering with each other. But again, the interference pattern was seen. Physicists were perplexed by this.
It somehow seems to have been aware of there being two slits, not one, because it's given rise to this interference pattern. How does one atom do that? Does it split in half? Does it become like a cloud that goes through both?
The path taken by the photon is not an element of reality. We are not allowed to talk about the photon passing through this or this slit.
I love this guy saying that the path the photon takes isn't an element of reality. We're not allowed to say that. Which way is it going? We don't know. It's such a cool, it's such a somber, authoritative way to look at this. There's exactly 2 minutes left of this double slit experiment. Super important to grasp this.
Neither are we allowed to say that the photons pass through both slits. All this kind of language is not applicable.
So they further modified the experiment to get to the bottom of the mystery. They put a measuring device at one slit to see which one the particle actually went through. But when the electrons were being this closely observed, they went back to behaving like little objects and produced a clump pattern, not an interference pattern. Somehow, the act of observation meant that they only went through one slit, not both. The electrons seemed to decide how to behave as if they were aware of being watched. How could this possibly be the case? Could the presence of a conscious observer be influencing the experiment?
Consciousness is information. It's an information field. Okay, it's data.
In 1978, physicist John Wheeler proposed a new way of doing the double slit experiment that might finally reveal what's really happening. He proposed what is called the delayed choice experiment, in which the decision of whether or not to observe the particles isn't made until after they have gone through the slits, but before they've impacted the detector. This animation is highly simplified, but you get the idea.
YouTube took out the music.
Here comes the light, It travels through the double slit barrier as waves. The waves are past the slits but haven't yet hit the detector. And here comes the scientist. His eyes are closed. He's delaying his choice to make this an observed experiment. And then... The results of the experiment didn't solve the mystery. Instead, it got even stranger. Because what was found was that at the moment of decision to observe, the waves became particles. And not only that, but they actually made a record of themselves as having traveled through the slits as particles. Yes, you heard me. Deciding to run the observed experiment causes the waves to become particles, and this causal force extends backwards in time.
Our choice of what experiment to do determines the prior state of the electron.
Running the experiment unobserved does not cause this effect.
All right, that's a big deal, and we'll close out the simulation science on that. But basically, if somebody is observing, if a human consciousness is interacting with photons, with basically they've done it higher up with even higher level matter than photons or energy than photons, the very matter that creates this reality is waiting to see how we're going to interact with it to determine its state. And this can actually travel in time, this action that we have with it, which would kind of get into prophecy and the idea of how like time isn't as fixed or rigid as we perceive it to be, and how guys like Philip K. Dick jump around, and Edgar Cayce and potentially Nostradamus and whatever, all these different things. So it's just it's an interesting way to perceive reality. We think that things happen to us; they could be happening because of us, and I think this is why Yeshua is very specific about having the right mindset, about doing the right things when nobody's looking. And I think that a big part of why I want to talk about this is I believe that the Luciferians have had access to this information because they work for their father, the devil, and he kind of knows how this thing works. And so, they give us this inert version of Christianity where we don't, we don't really have a chance to compete with them, and they just kind of stay in control. And meanwhile, they're given like the secrets to the universe. So it doesn't change how you would approach serving God. Actually, Christopher or Curtis, sorry, I want to talk to you about this on TikTok because, whatever. But the whole talking things into existence is really important too. So please, when you come over to TikTok, we'll talk about it. Okay, so the next thing is, so we're in the potentially simulated reality, and basically, if you listen to the scientists, I'm going to fast forward past all of that. If you listen to the scientists, they basically say that, well, if we're in a simulation, then, there's a simulation before this one, and a simulation before this one, and a simulation before this one. And the root source would be our ancestors or aliens. This is what Neil deGrasse Tyson says. This is what all these people say. And this is one of the reasons why I'm embracing the simulation hypothesis is no, if we're in a simulated order, this isn't just one of billions and billions and billions. This is the one that God created. He is the source. He's the creator. And they start with this idea. They start with the premise that this universe created itself, and Darwinian science is a real thing, and this is how it works. So therefore, we are in a simulation. That means that our ancestors made this, right? Actually, I wasn't going to show you that, but I have to. I have to show you this one last thing because it bridges me into this next thing. Listen to the godlessness. Listen to the refusal of allowing God into the simulation, or him being responsible for this. But listen, Reeves said in the messages that he has a hard time understanding this as being God. But listen to how these people talk theologically about the programmer, or about how this would have happened.
You just need enough of the world that they see around them.
That they see around them.
Right.
So you want to start digging, and
that's so funny.
And haven't put the earth there. There's a flag that goes up in the programmer, and they say, "Up, need more Earth." So they
Right.
put Earth beneath you while you can keep digging.
It's like the Truman Show.
Yeah, well, for example.
Right.
Okay.
Cool.
Or does Minecraft you can build
Or
stuff?
Minecraft.
Right.
Oh, that is Minecraft.
Right. Okay.
God, that guy's a brilliant genius. Okay.
So and we went to the moon. They said, okay, let's make sure
Right,
the moon is
right.
there.
Right.
Okay.
Maybe that's
Nice,
why we
of
can't
course he
travel
threw that in
faster
there.
than the speed of light. Because if we could, we'd be able to get to another galaxy
Before they could program it.
that galaxy.
Oh!
Okay, watch this. And this is why this is so important. When you start asking questions like, how are we in a simulation? You go, who is the programmer? How did this happen? We're in a create, like, this is why this is so important. Why I'm going to keep basically on this bandwagon is if we're in a simulated reality, you have to choose to believe how we got here, who did this, and why. We are in a designed order. And I get that as a Christian, it's like, wow, this is really, I don't know if I agree with it, but if you're a non-Christian, if you're an atheist, and you start going, wow, something created this reality, it's game-changing. Look at these two non-Christians talking about the rules that the programmer put in on this reality.
So much fun.
So the programmer put in that limit.
Put in the limit.
Because that's the
Speed of
fastest
light,
they can
that's
get.
we can't program fast enough. So we
Would anybody argue that if there is a speed of light, that God would have programmed in that rule?
put in a limiter. The speed of light is a limiter so that you can't get to the next thing before we build it.
All right, so let me finish. That's good.
Go
That's
ahead.
good, Chuck.
All right.
So let me finish this. So now that world evolves and they develop computing power.
Right.
And they say, we want to play video games.
So now we're going to make a world.
So then they make a world and they have sufficient computing power that they invent to create a whole universe within their computers.
Okay.
And then
They make a world.
And then they make a world all the way on down.
Right.
It could be hundreds, thousands, billions, infinite.
All right. So far, this sounds like it still works.
That's fine. So now close your eyes, throw a dart.
Mm.
Which of these universes are you going to land in? The first one that's real or the gazillion that are not?
Well, yeah.
Just statistically. Okay.
Am I drinking when we're playing this darts game? Because
then you missed entirely
everything. No.
So
yeah,
there's something called Bayesian.
Okay, so you see where he's going with that, right? They basically go, okay, fine, we're in a simulation. If you watch, I've watched Neil deGrasse Tyson talk about this for, I don't know, 25 hours, probably more than that. And he goes, well, if we're in a simulation, it's probably some kid who's a jerk. He's an alien on another planet, and he's just, he's just a terrible person. And this is why all the floods happen and all the catastrophes and viruses and stuff, because he just gets bored and he like plagues the world or whatever. And then they rip God, or they go, there's no way this is real reality. There's a million realities. We're just one of a million. And they marginalize God. Like, no, what if the mind responsible for this reality is God, and this is source-based reality? These people can't even, it's not even their lexicon that there could be a God and he created this reality, right? As an intelligent design guy, I go like Chuck Missler. Chuck Missler was a simulation guy, and he goes, yeah, we're in a simulation and God of the Bible made it. And that's where I'm at. So if we are in what I would call God's simulation, God's created order, and the devil wants to be like God, what would the devil do? What would he do? Any chance he would make his own synthetic counterfeit simulated reality? I mean, yes. Of course, that's exactly what he would do. And then we look at who is behind all of this, right? We know that this is great. You guys, this is where it gets good. Thank you guys. A lot of you guys have seen some of this before. I've taught it more passionately at times. So thank you for kind of seeing us through it. But check this out. We don't need that one. The metaverse is a product of Mark Zuckerberg, that weird reptile alien dude. Mark Zuckerberg didn't come up with it. He wasn't like, oh, he stole the idea, right? He stole the idea. Look at this. Winklevoss and his brother are known for co-founding Harvard Connection. The Winklevoss brothers sued founder Mark Zuckerberg, claiming he stole it, right? He stole the idea. Everybody kind of knows that story. If you've seen the movie The Social Network, it covers it, right? What's funny is like, you Google this over here, who had the idea? Mark Zuckerberg did, right? How much did Zuckerberg pay for that? So Zuckerberg is big behind the metaverse. So is Bill Gates. I saw you guys talking about Bill Gates earlier. Bill Gates did steal the ideas from Macintosh to make the Windows. It was actually not that. It was from the Seattle Computer Company. He stole it from Gary Kildall from the Seattle Computer Company. So you've got these two guys that are creating this metaverse who are liars and thieves of their father, the devil. And they're creating this like place for people to go, for them to take their consciousness out of God's reality and put it into these guys, these maniacs, sycophant, psychopath, narcissist, whatever you want to call them, thieves, their reality, right? This is where we're headed. And people don't like, I'm older where like, the metaverse isn't something I've ever been in, but it's coming. Like this is happening and it's happening fast. We are going to be in there, humankind, in the next 5 to 10 years. And COVID actually plays in there. So let's see. I want to show you guys the ones that don't realize how serious this metaverse thing is. Meet the gaming pioneer, building digital alternatives to real life. Of course, they brought in Travis Scott, who I didn't realize he was like a full-on Luciferian until the Astroworld deal. If you watch this Travis Scott video, he flies in on this planet and gives life to man and stomps around and whatever else. But check this out. This is where this gets really important, okay? In 1989, American urban sociologist Ray Oldenburg coined a term for our social spaces. The third place, sitting alongside the home, which is the first place, and work the second place. This is a communal hangout, a role traditionally served by the likes of pubs, coffee shops, and cinemas. Remember those? Brick and mortar. But as the young generation turn to their screens for social engagement, the popularity of these spaces has waned. Then a global pandemic struck, and they ceased to exist altogether. When a skyscraper-sized Travis Scott was made Planet fall inside of Fortnite, it wasn't just the biggest concert happening in the world, it was the only concert. There's a conversation going on about the metaverse and whether we're increasingly going to be migrating to these online spaces, says Witta. That process has been accelerated by the pandemic. Wow. So we know what COVID has done. We know what the pandemic has done, right? We've lost our businesses. The middle class has been destroyed and erased. People have died. A lot of people have died. Dystopic scientific tyranny rose out of the ashes of it, right? And the metaverse. I didn't realize that really till today when I was doing this research. COVID and the pandemic and isolation and locking you down and flattening the curve and this whole thing took us away from literal, actual, physical brick and mortar, human to human engagement, and is forcing everybody into the metaverse. And again, us older folk may not know how serious it is, but this is where concerts are going. Travis Scott made $12 billion. Would that be right? I could, whatever, outrageous amount of number of money. Bieber's in there. Ariana Grande is in there. They sell real estate. You can actually buy real estate. I think this is probably going to be the least bit of like compelling information I'm going to show you tonight, because I'm probably wrong about this, but I understand Earth 2 is in the metaverse, and in Earth 2, the metaverse, this is like you can actually buy land right? Like you can go buy this. These are like physical places you can buy and go build your little house or whatever. And there's only the size of Earth. It's like a simulation of the Earth, and you can go buy your land right now on Earth too. Right? Does it start to make sense why Satan would want to do this? He's literally making his own Earth. Oh, look, it's coming out from Earth. It's like pulling out. Okay. So I'm going to show you a couple more pieces of how scary the metaverse is, and then I'll try and make my closing statement on kind of what I think has happened and really where this goes. I just realized that you're looking at me and I'm looking at a screen, and you can't see the screen that I'm looking at.
Virtual environment might be used for anything: work, play, concerts, movie trips, or simply hanging out. Billionaire Facebook boss Mark Zuckerberg called it the next version of the internet and said this isn't about spending more time in screens. It's about making the time we already spend better. Speaking to journalists, including The Sun, Meta's VR boss Andrew Bosworth said, "The metaverse is a set of virtual 3D spaces where you can share immersive experiences with each other when you can't be together. This all is really a broad idea. The metaverse will have loads of experiences, including games, social networks, videos, shopping, health and fitness, and more." Sounds interesting, right? Now, why would the billionaire tech enthusiast Elon Musk warn about such a thing? Dr. David Reed, professor of AI and spatial computing at Liverpool Hope University, thinks it will change our lives, just like the internet did. He said the metaverse has a huge implication. It comes with fantastic advantages and terrifying dangers. He's also concerned about the possible hazards. The AI expert is concerned about the massive amount of data that can be assessed through hacking. He also worries that avatars might be hacked, putting you in contact with hackers instead of individuals you know and trust. The metaverse's ultimate goal is mixed reality, not merely virtual reality or mixed reality, MR. It's about integrating the digital and physical worlds. This blend may eventually be so good and pervasive that the virtual and real worlds become indistinguishable. And there's a huge demand for that. Whoever has hold of it has influence over your entire reality. This is some really advanced use of art.
Did you hear that part? This is how big this is. Let's play the last 30 seconds of that again.
Integrating the digital and physical worlds. This blend may eventually be so good and pervasive that the virtual and real worlds become indistinguishable. And there's a huge demand for that. Whoever...
If this continues, the connection between the real world and the metaverse is going to be blurred. And there's a real need for that, he says. People want to leave this world because of how bad the last couple of years have been, because of how bad COVID is. It's becoming insufferable, and people want to leave this world and go to a different world where they can be their own god, of their own synthetic imposter reality.
And there's a huge demand for that. Whoever has hold of it has influence over your entire reality.
Whoever has hold of that has influence over your entire reality. You guys ever have a dream? Anybody ever have a dream where you're dreaming some stupid thing, like, you know, you're in a school bus and it drives over the cliff, and then you're in the water, and then you're under the water driving your school bus and you're scared, but then you're in a house and then you're eating whatever, a cloud, and you're like, oh, I'm totally doing this. This makes sense. Is your brain ever like, yo, that isn't, no, you're dreaming. This isn't real. No, not at all. You just do it. You just have the dream. You wake up and you go, that was crazy. Where was I a few minutes ago when I was just, wow, I totally thought that was happening. I still have dreams about snowboarding all the time, and I'm jumping and I'm doing so good. And I'm never like, wow, I don't snowboard anymore. I just do it. I'm just snowboarding again. My brain's never like, you don't do that anymore. Because your consciousness interacting with this reality is a hologram. It's an hallucination. It's It's you're seeing these things and you're having these sensory feelings, and it's being broadcast into your brain, and your brain makes it real. Okay. I believe your consciousness is wired into your body through some sort of technology, Bluetooth, like the movie Avatar, something like that. Some sort of magic. I would say magic because we don't understand the technology, but I believe God did it. But we're some sort of technology we don't know. And we're experiencing this reality. And then when we fall asleep in this reality, it's still our consciousness experiencing this reality. When this technology gets good enough, you will plug in and you will leave this reality, and your consciousness will absolutely experience what it feels like is a real sentient, immersive experience. That's what it'll do. And the guys that are doing this aren't just doing it for money. They're doing this because they are in direct opposition of God of the Bible, right? We shouldn't be building AI. There's no reason to build AI, and we're building AI. They are building AI because they're maniacs and they want to be God. And now they have the technological infrastructure to get you to leave God's reality, God's created reality, programmed reality, and go into the devil's artificial one, where all bets are off. You can be a gorilla, you can be a god, you can name it, create your own universe. You are God. And do you think that when you get used to that, you're going to want to be in this reality anymore? When you have endorphins and serotonin being released because you're having these experiences, you want to go back into this reality where you're just a guy and probably now overweight or whatever your body's looking like because you're just plugged into this thing? Think about it with climate change. They want us, if you've read Agenda 21, they want you in a 10 by 10 box, eating gruel, eating recycled meat or whatever. This works. Think about the movie The Matrix. They're in a pod being fed cannibalistically, intravenously. This is what the devil wants, okay? This is what the devil wants. And he's close. He's close to pulling this thing off. And unfortunately, like, here's what's unfortunate about it is those of us that like barely did Facebook because we're older aren't playing Fortnite, aren't in these realities, didn't go to the concert, aren't experiencing this thing, aren't falling in love in the metaverse, aren't the best, whatever, super competition pew pew game player around. I think that's like an official Fortnite metaverse game. We don't get it. Like, we watched the movie Ready Player One and we're like, that'll never happen. It's happening, right? And in that world, he lived in like a really macabre, depressed, super blue collar, like low income, like it was like high rise of like Spielberg just like rubs it in your face. Like, yeah, you're gonna live in like a multi-stack trailer. We're gonna build the trailers up because you're gonna be totally broken, terrible, like sick and miserable. But don't worry, you can go into Zuckerberg's universe and be the god of your universe, and it'll be great. Like, there's few movies, like when I watched the first Matrix, I was like, wow, that changed my whole paradigm. The Truman Show kind of did that. Ready Player One did that. I watched it and I felt dirty because I was like, I get it. I could see doing that. I used to play video games quite a bit. I'm a damn fine Mario player. Playing mean Madden too. I can only imagine what these children, and now we understand like screen time and like getting you used to screen time and like hours and hours and hours a day. And like, we, the older people, will probably never go into the metaverse, or we may or may not, whatever. But our children, it is going to be a fight to keep them out of it. It's probably already a fight right now for a lot of parents. And what? You're going to tell them that God of this world is real and you need to like be a good person? What is that? Where does God fit into the metaverse? You know what I think is funny is a thought experiment of like second, third generation of once they come up with a human brain interface augmentation, which is coming through transhumanism or whatever. And I think Elon Musk is going to probably help develop the chip consciousness uplink where you don't have to be, because that's like you just have a computer strapped to your face. Well, it's going to be a lot more immersive when it's like installed into your brain, whatever. You get like the second or third generation person who's in there, and you start telling them like, this isn't the real world. They're gonna be like, what do you mean? Like, like this flying and the green skin and whatever. Like, no, this isn't real. Well, what's real? Well, there's like you have like a physical body somewhere that's tapped into this. I don't believe you. What happens when I die in the metaverse? Whatever. Like, I could just imagine people like having spiritual discussions about these physical bodies that we have when they're just so wired into the metaverse. They're not going to even believe that this is a thing. And this is where I got excited about the Matrix idea when I first saw it. I was like, cool, yeah, the Matrix simulation reality is this reality, and their physical reality is the spiritual reality. That was the metaphor that I always saw. And I still think so. I think this is an illusion. I think this is a temporary illusion. I think that you're in a test of some kind that I believe God of the Bible set up. And did he use 1 and 0 binary computer technology? I say probably not, but it's something like, I can't say probably not, but I'm not saying that we're in a computer somewhere, but the technology is the same, rendering around us, rendering around the user, and the devil wants it. The devil's creating it. He's got his henchmen creating it. And there's a very good possibility that in the next 20 years, this is what brings God's judgment, because he's like, you know what, you guys, whatever, this is like, I dealt with your normal sin. I dealt with this and that, but I couldn't deal with what happened before the flood. I couldn't deal with what you're doing at Babylon. I can't deal with this metaverse thing. I'm done. And I really I have a heart for God in this, because this reality is good and it should be even better. But the people that run it want us sick. They're stealing and killing and destroying us, partially through this COVID thing, which apparently is a justification to get into the multiverse. It really sucks that this is happening. But anyways, I would encourage you, if we don't do another show on this, to choose God's reality. Choose this created order over the multiverse and stay away from it as best you can. I understand that's probably misinformation or disinformation or whatever, but it's good to be human. It's good to interact with other humans. It's good to have your hands in the soil. It's good to get sunlight. It's good to work. It's good to have a family. It's good to be the right kind of person. I get it. It's going to be flashy in that place, but you don't need to be God. Let God be God. Okay? You don't need to go to a place where you can be God. You're going to get us all killed. This is going to get us all killed. Repent. Anyways. I might do more on it. I might not. What's hard about it for me is that there's so much information. I know you could tell that I was kind of overwhelmed by the different angles I could take at this. But it's a really exciting topic. And I encourage Christians to look into it. I understand what Reeves said. I understand how you don't want to offend God and you don't want to embrace new age, but I don't think it's that. I just think it's the potential explanation for how God did it. And I think the devil knows it, and he's synthesizing it for himself and trying to get you to go in it. So, all right, guys, we'll be back on Tuesday. We are heading over to TikTok for the after party where we can talk about this more in depth. I appreciate it. In transmission.
That's the way that it goes. It's what nobody knows. While every day my confusion grows. Every time I see you falling myself, if I hurt someone else, I'll never see just what we're meant to be. Every time I see you falling, get down on my knees and pray. I'm waiting for that